Now, every year it's one of the longest avian migrations in the world. Around 80,000 Godwits leave their breeding grounds in the Alaskan Arctic across the Pacific Ocean before settling in New Zealand for summer in the southern hemisphere. Now, thanks to radio transmitters, experts can track exactly where the birds are and how long they fly for. And this year, not only has the longest flight ever by a land bird been recorded, but one Godwit was forced to make a dramatic U-turn back to Alaska after 57 hours of non-stop flying. Well, let's find out more about these incredible journeys. We're joined now by the manager of the Pokoro-Coromaranda Shorebird Centre on New Zealand's North Island, Keith Wadley. Mr. Wadley, thank you very much for being with us. Good afternoon to you there in New Zealand. Tell us more about the incredible journeys that these birds make.
Yeah, well, they're astonishing birds. They breed in Alaska and they migrate to New Zealand every year. And in order to make these non-stop flights, they've got to do some pretty amazing things. Certainly, they've got to be able to navigate. They've got to find their way. But they've also got to do things like double their weight before they depart. They go through various changes within their bodies before migration flights as well. So not only are they making these huge flights, but they're doing some remarkable things in order to make those flights.
Do we understand how these birds navigate over this incredible journey?
The consensus seems to be that they follow a number of cues like magnetic fields, the stars and the sun and the moon, presumably. But they also seem to have a very good sense of where they are. So one thing this tracking has showed is that when birds are drifted off their optimal course by maybe persistent winds, after a period of time, when the conditions are okay, they can clearly adjust and change their direction and get back onto a heading for where they were originally going from. So they know where they are and they know how to get to where they need to go.
Well, you mentioned changing direction. We mentioned in the introduction this one bird that seemed to turn back to Alaska after already flying for 57 hours. Do we know why that bird would have done that?
It would have struck some very, very strong headwinds, early in the journey, and just decided, well, this is enough of that, and off it went back to Alaska, where it stayed for about 11 days before setting off again. But it wasn't actually able to make the full flight to New Zealand this time around either. It sort of struck weather conditions further south on its track and landed on New Caledonia, where it spent the next few weeks. So it made 2 attempts this year to get here non-stop. The interesting thing is the same bird last year also stopped on New Caledonia. So, 3 attempts in 2 years, and the bird never quite made that flight, although it is now back with us. It's left New Caledonia and it's now back here.
You've been studying these birds for 30 years. What changes have you noticed, and what changes do you predict because of things like climate change?
Oh, the big change I've noticed in that time is the numbers of Godwits in this population we're talking about is effectively halved in that time. And the main driver of that has been loss of habitat at their staging sites in East Asia around the Yellow Sea. Massive habitat loss there has led to these declined populations of not just Godwits but many other shorebirds. But looking ahead, climate change is going to affect these birds everywhere you look. Rising sea levels where you've got hard edges will reduce the area of intertidal flats where the birds forage. You've got changing temperatures on the tundra, on the Arctic tundra, which brings forward the food source a lot earlier than the birds are used to. Changing vegetation patterns on the tundra as well.
Okay, Mr. Woodley, unfortunately we're out of time. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate it.